And the political messaging war continuing as the government shutdown reaches day 2. The White House signaling that certain government agencies will be permanently cut. We go now live to NTD's Washington correspondent, Mari Otsu, who is live at the White House. Good evening, Mari. So what is the White House saying about some of these potential layoffs?
Steve, good evening. The White House today is saying that thousands of workers, federal workers, could be laid off. And the president says that he's meeting today with Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and that the two will discuss both temporary and permanent cuts to Democrat agencies that the president calls a political scam. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt this morning saying which agencies they'll look into. Watch.
Look, we're going to look at agencies that don't align with the administration's values that we feel are a waste of the taxpayer dollar. And so the president wants to be a good steward of the American taxpayer dollar during a time when our balance sheet is looking very grim because the Democrats chose to shut the government down.
Caroline.
This is just the latest action in line with the administration's broader push to cut down on federal workers and slash government spending. And Russ Vought on Wednesday told House Republicans that mass firings of federal workers would start in just a day or two. And President Trump has said that while a shutdown is the last thing that he wants, he also can't believe that, quote, radical left Democrats are giving him what he calls an unprecedented opportunity to get rid of certain agencies. Steve?
So, Mari, the administration also appears to be doubling down on its message to universities. Give us more insight about the letters that were sent out this week.
Sure, Steve. On Wednesday night, the White House sent out letters to 9 elite universities around the country, offering them priority access to federal funds if they agree to the administration's demands. And those demands include creating a better environment for conservatives on campus, cutting departments that spark violence against conservatives and conservative ideas, freezing tuition for 5 years, and banning the use of race or sex in admissions and hiring. The Trump administration has for months now battled universities over anti-Semitism and DEI concerns. Both Columbia and Brown University have recently struck multi-million-dollar deals with the administration. And here's the president earlier this week talking about a deal with Harvard. Watch.
I guess we reached a deal with Harvard today, so we'll see how that, all you have to do is paper it, right, Linda? Just yes, sir. Paper it out. So this would be a giant trade school, series of trade schools. It would be run by Harvard. Now, this is something that we're close to finalizing. We haven't done it yet. But they'd put up $500 million. Interest and everything else would go to that account, meaning go to the trade school.
So we're soon expecting new details about that $500 million Harvard settlement, which could require it to start its own network of trade schools. Steve, back to you.
Mari Otsu live at the White House. Thank you, Mari. And on day 2 of the government shutdown, the House and Senate are not voting on either bill, or any bill for that matter. Both Republicans and Democrats appear dug in their positions. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has an update.
They have made a decision that they would rather give taxpayer-funded benefits to illegal aliens than to keep the doors open for the American people, to keep vital services, veteran services, healthcare and nutrition for women, infants, and children. They would rather not pay the troops and TSA agents and Border Patrol agents. They would rather stop services of FEMA in the middle of a hurricane season than to do the right thing.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson detailed how the Democratic proposal to reopen the government would repeal parts of the One Big Beautiful bill that closed the loopholes that allowed for non-citizens to access taxpayer-sponsored health care.
Donald Trump and Republicans shut the federal government down because they don't want to provide health care to working class Americans.
Democrats have not shied away from publicly stating that they forced a government shutdown because Republicans, who are in the majority in the House and in the Senate, would not acquiesce to their policy demands.
The reason we're having this government shutdown is because Democrats are standing up for health care for Americans and their families, and Republicans are refusing to change direction.
Republicans are open to negotiate the extension of healthcare tax credits under the Affordable Care Act, but not while the government is shut down.
All the pressure should be on the 44 Democrats who are dug in to try to pander to the far left corner of their base. That's what this is. How important is it to appeal to the radical left of your base and hurt Americans? Because if they drag this on through the weekend, more and more people will be hurt.
Some 750,000 federal workers are at risk of being furloughed, and thousands are at risk of losing their jobs altogether if the administration is forced to enact reductions in force of agencies and departments if the government shutdown continues. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
2 people killed and 3 more seriously wounded today in an attack on a synagogue in the British city of Manchester. Authorities say they identified the suspect as Jihad al-Shami, a 35-year-old British citizen of Syrian descent. British authorities have declared the incident a terrorist attack.
At this time, we know that a car was driven directly at members of the public outside the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue on Middleton Road, Crumsall, in Manchester. The driver of the car was seen then to attack people with a knife. He was wearing about his body a vest which had the appearance of an explosive device. There were a large number of worshippers attending the synagogue at the time of this attack.
Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values.
Well, it's obviously it's a bit eerie. Obviously, no one knows the full story of what's gone on yet, but we know the basics, and it's devastating to hear on the holiest day of the year for the Jewish community.
I think just everyone's concerned, everybody's worried, everybody's scared, and we shouldn't be scared to feel or believe in what we believe.
The attacker killing 2 members of the local Jewish community. 3 other men remain in the hospital with serious injuries. Police shot and killed the attacker. They also arrested 3 other people suspected of either commissioning, preparing, and investigating this act of terror. There are also 2 men in their 30s and a woman in her 60s. The UK's senior counterterrorism officer saying an investigation currently underway. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemning the attack, saying he was appalled. He cut short his visit to Denmark to chair an emergency response meeting in London following the attack. The Prime Minister saying the UK must defeat rising anti-Semitism, vowing to do everything to keep the Jewish community in the UK safe. He added that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country. And the Department of Justice says that groups that appear to be well-funded have been causing problems outside ICE facilities in Portland and Chicago. The Department of Homeland Security says it's getting ready to send more agents to the Portland facility as assaults continue to increase. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
In a memorandum titled Ending Political Violence Towards ICE, Attorney General Pam Bondi says that groups posted outside of ICE facilities in Portland and Chicago, quote, have been well organized and appear to be well funded. The document says near Chicago, rioters arrived with boxes of fireworks, N95 masks, gas masks, goggles, knee and elbow protection, and large quantities of food and water.
More than 200 violent rioters were at a Chicago ICE facility chanting, "Arrest ICE, shoot ICE."
The memorandum continues. Likewise, rioters in Portland, Oregon have repeatedly attacked and laid siege to an ICE processing center.
Anyone who threatens or assaults our federal officers will be arrested and charged federally, not in some liberal state court. Same goes for anyone who's funding and aiding these extremists.
The acting director for Immigration and Customs Enforcement says that the department is ready to send more agents to Portland. He tells Fox News that officers are facing Antifa-linked violence on a nightly basis.
But we're out there every night battling, people that are bringing sticks, bats, shields, throwing their own CS grenades at us. So it's not a peaceful situation. It's not First Amendment.
Lyons says that they've called on local and state officials to help, but haven't received much and are ready to act themselves.
They're planning right now, and I think we're holding to kind of see what Portland's going to do, but we're prepared to go ahead and protect our men and women of Vice.
Portland Police Chief Bob Day says that the police are working closely with their federal partners, but says the area outside of the ICE building is just one small area of the city.
The facility itself is managed and governed by the Federal Protective Service, and they have responsibility for that. And the incidents you speak of, for example, last night, occurring on their property. But Portland is very much engaged. And once again, this is just one small block in a big city that we're trying to manage for all the Portlanders.
There are social media videos circulating showing assaults and violence happening outside of the ICE building in Portland. One reporter from the post-millennial, Katie Davis Court, was seen getting struck by a pole while working, resulting in a black eye. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Department of Homeland Security telling NTD that on Tuesday night, over 100 rioters stormed an ICE facility in Portland. They assaulted law enforcement, even putting one member of law enforcement into the hospital. DHS tells us that they also faced blinding strobe lights and that 6 arrests were made on charges including assaulting law enforcement. And a journalist in Portland, as we just saw, says she was left with a black eye after an Antifa-affiliated protester struck her with a flagpole outside of an ICE facility. She says she ran to a Portland police officer for help, but the police refused to make any arrests. The department says an officer tried to speak with the suspect, but the suspect fled. To discuss the realities on the ground, we're joined live by Jim Hayes, former senior official at the Department of Homeland Security. Jim, great to have you back with us. Now, Antifa protests are often violent. Many have legal observers who document police actions, later using those records to challenge law enforcement. Are local police handicapped when it comes to Antifa because of potential legal action? And how should law enforcement be navigating this situation?
Well, it's good to be with you. And what we've seen here is in certain jurisdictions, they are handicapped by the elected officials there. It's one thing to say that the Federal Protective Service has responsibility for that footprint, that physical footprint, but these protests, these activities are often taking place surrounding several blocks of federal facilities. And look, in any other circumstance, let's say that it wasn't a federal building, it wasn't an immigration and customs enforcement building, the local police, the local law enforcement would generally be much more cooperative in those situations. So it's clearly a situation where they've been told to stay away from these areas and essentially in these jurisdictions, let these people protest, let these people incite violence, let them cause a lot of damage to federal properties and potentially law enforcement officers, reporters, as well as detainees, as we saw in the shooting in Dallas.
Jim, Antifa as an entity or organization, it's being argued that it's decentralized and difficult to track, making leadership hard to pinpoint and target. Is that the case? Is Antifa sort of this loosely managed organization that will make it difficult to track people down affiliated with it? And with President Trump designating it as a terrorist organization, how do you see the administration approaching this?
So from everything I've read and people I've spoken to, that is an accurate definition of how the group operates. And it is, when you think of it in the context of the president's designation, it has a lot in common with some of the other terrorist groups that are international terrorist groups. And I think the president's designation is going to do two things. One, it's going to allow the Joint Terrorism Task Force to have a unit, just like they had a unit dedicated to identify individuals who are associated with Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and be able to identify these people because, look, they don't walk around with a name tag saying that they're part of Antifa. But the other thing that it's going to allow them to do, Steve, it's going to allow them to attack and identify the financial support that this organization is receiving. And that's been very effective with international terrorist groups. And it's also been very effective here in just this short term. In 2025, we saw that once the FBI and federal agencies said in Los Angeles that they were going to work to identify who was supporting the people who were involved in the violent protests there, the protesters left. that situation cleared up very quickly. And with the prospect of being able to not just arrest people for terrorism acts, but also charge them with material support to terrorism, now you're talking about asset forfeiture, seizure of homes, seizure of conveyances. It's a very, very strong law that would allow for a significant deterrence of any group that's operating in that manner in the United States.
Jim, federal immigration officials say they're preparing to deploy more agents to Portland in response to Antifa-linked attacks. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons saying yesterday, quote, "It's been a consistent battle every night with Antifa in Portland," adding that they haven't received help despite repeated calls for local and state support. What is the reality on the ground like from what you're hearing?
Well, we've seen this in a number of different cities, Portland being the most recent, but also the most sustained, with over a month long of daily, nightly protests, flags burning, other types of violence being incited. You saw it in Chicago earlier this week, over the weekend, where the administration sent the Border Patrol into Chicago to protect the facility there. And this is a responsible approach from ICE leadership. It's something that is his responsibility to protect the men and women of the agency. And where a situation presents itself that's unusual, and certainly these situations are right now, where you have violent protesters and hundreds of protesters at ICE facilities, then he's got a responsibility. The secretary has a responsibility that they're taking seriously to send in additional manpower to make sure that, one, operations can continue unaffected, that they can carry out the enforcement of the laws of the United States, and that they can do it safely, both for themselves, the people that are in their custody, as well as, even, we don't often think about this, the people who may be subject as part of that protest to that same violence. So there's a number of different things that are going to be protected by sending additional manpower.
Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi commenting on crime in other cities, particularly Memphis. This says the government shutdown enters day 2. Let's have a quick listen.
Shutdown does not affect our program at all, because they can play politics, they can shut down the federal government, but President Trump knows crime doesn't stop and we don't stop.
Jim, as a longtime veteran of the Department of Homeland Security, how have past shutdowns impacted law enforcement? And are ICE officers out there still working regardless of if they're paid or not?
There's going to be very little impact to service from the area of DHS. So I've spoken with people who I am friendly with at Customs and Border Protection and with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they are 100% active. They are on board. They have not suspended any of their duties. Now, when you look at the mechanics of the shutdown and how it affects funding, it can be personally very painful for these officers and agents that put their lives on the line every day, because they won't be receiving a paycheck for the work that they're doing until the government reopens. So there's a lot of collateral damage in the way of how these employees have to worry about finances potentially in that short term. But from a law enforcement perspective, from a mission perspective, all of those people are on duty. They're at full staff, and they are going to continue carrying out the mission.
Jim Hayes, really appreciate your insights. Thank you. And a former school superintendent in Des Moines, Iowa, now charged with possessing firearms as an illegal immigrant. ICE arresting Ian Roberts last Friday. He was found with a loaded handgun wrapped in a towel in his vehicle, along with a hunting knife and $3,000 in cash. In addition, court filings suggest authorities discovered 4 firearms during a search of his home. According to ICE, Roberts was born in Guyana, later coming to the United States on a student visa in 1999. Immigration officials say he was working in the country without documentation and was ordered to be deported by a judge last year. Just yesterday, hundreds of students in Des Moines staging walkouts and demonstrations calling for Roberts' release. Roberts resigned as the superintendent on Tuesday.